This is the first episode of Mile DeFi, and I'm so glad that you're joining us along this journey. This episode is with Nico Gallardo from Bolivia. So this podcast was actually recorded live at Ethereum Denver at the podcast studios they had at the conference. So it's really exciting. You can even hear a little bit of chatter and buzz in the background. So the reason I wanted to start with this podcast is because Bolivia and Guatemala in many ways share a lot of similarities, both from a governance perspective, as well as a socioeconomic backdrop within which both countries sit, as well as the lack of financial infrastructure that exists for last mile communities, particularly in the rural regions of each of our respective countries. This was a really great conversation to really contrast both the situation in Bolivia and explore how that might relate to the people in Guatemala as well. So in this conversation, Nico and I discussed his journey towards becoming a builder in crypto, how he landed and navigated the crypto ecosystem. If you didn't know, transacting with crypto in Bolivia is forbidden. So we discussed why a government like Bolivia would choose to make a decision like this, what the current state of the crypto ecosystem in Bolivia is, and where the future of crypto is heading in Latin America. We discussed the importance of building organic communities such as Ethereum Bolivia, which Nico is a part of, and also touched on Eth Kipu, which is a community that was born post-Devcon, which is functionally a community of communities of Latin American builders and ecosystems. We then explore Nico's thesis in regards to the lack of financial infrastructure, particularly for disenfranchised communities in his country. And then we begin to tease out, okay, what opportunities could crypto provide and where are we starting to see some seedlings of growth? In particular, a lot of Nico's work focuses on the intersection of decentralized finance and decentralized social. So we discuss the key catalysts that decentralized social plays in onboarding billions of people around the world. So just really quickly, by the way, unfortunately, the quality of the audio and video isn't as high as I usually like to produce this content. But nevertheless, it's an amazing conversation. And I'm sure if you weren't already bullish on the region, this will get you to that place. Enjoy, friends. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the podcast series. We are recording live from Ethereum Denver, and I'm here with my good friend Nico, who I've had the pleasure of seeing in different conferences around the world, and I just grabbed him now and thought he'd be the perfect person to sort of like intro the podcast and set the scene, especially sort of given where you're from and your background and all the work you've done and what you're doing now. So anyways, I'll let you introduce yourself and speak to a little bit more of who you are and what you're up to.
Amazing. Thanks, Marcus, for having me here. Super exciting. We've been in touch since not that long ago, but it feels way longer than
definitely
it's been. So super glad to be here. I'm Nico Gallardo. I started Ethereum Bolivia, the community there, in July last year. I actually live in Amsterdam, so I was a few months in Bolivia and started the community there. And it was on the road to DEFCON, so it grew quite a bit. We were really proud of everyone who's involved. Aside from that, I started another IRL community in Amsterdam called Web3 Lab. With someone else, and it expanded a little bit all over Europe now. And my main projects are Web3 Social. I'm building on Lens Protocol. I'm building Lens Clubs, which is a way to share a Lens account together with multiple people. So multiple Lens handles can control one. Let's say can be used for your brand or for your DAO, for your community, or even for like a creator guild that you create. And the other one is Troop Finance. It's a collaborative investment platform built on Lens Protocol, where people can join together and discuss investment strategies, DeFi strategies, and invest in it together, basically.
Awesome. Nice, man. Well, I'm really excited to sort of like dive into the theses behind each of these different projects. But I think it's always really like important and valuable to sort of start with the start of your journey, right? And so I'm curious to hear more about how did you end up in crypto and what led you here?
So I was working in fintech in Web2 back in 2017, 2018. And I was building investment products for a fintech. And I started to hear about Bitcoin, 2018 it started to drop. So I thought, this is interesting. If it's making people talk about it, it should be something fun to dive into. So I went into it started reading a lot about it. I'm not technical, so I was reading a lot about economics and the philosophy behind it. Um, at the time, a friend of mine introduced me to the Austrian School of Economics, which was really aligned with the promise of Bitcoin. So I decided to create a website, a Bitcoin education website for the Spanish-speaking community that explained a little bit about the philosophy and stuff like that. And then shortly after, I joined incubator to start Troop, and that was 1 year ago. So after, let's say, 6 months of working on the education platform, I joined that incubator and started Troop. And shortly after, I started to get involved more and more on community building IRL, because I kind of needed to connect with other people where I was living in Amsterdam. So I partnered with this startup that was organizing some events, and I told them, let's organize some Web3 events, and that's how the community flourished. And inspired by that, a few months after, I started Ethereum Bolivia together with other people. Of course, inspired by all the amazing communities that are out there in Latin America, in Ethereum Latin America. And yeah, that's it was a short time, but it feels like a lifetime, man.
Yeah. It's always funny, right? Like the saying of a day in crypto can feel like years. But I'd love to hear more about like the situation in Bolivia, where you're from, and what is from what I take it is like Bolivia, in the country, it's like using crypto or trading crypto in and out of fiat is illegal, right? And so I'd love to like understand why a country would decide to do that. Like, how was crypto being used in Bolivia before this legislation came in? What are the motivations behind like making this so? And what sort of response has the Ethereum Bolivia community or the wider ecosystem sort of like taken in response?
Yeah, it's a super interesting topic. Bolivia made forbid crypto in general 2 times already, which is funny. Like they didn't legalize it and then forbid it again. They just said it twice, kind of. But it's not necessarily illegal, because like it's not penalized. But if like the central bank sent like some announcement saying that like if they see that your account has anything to do with crypto, they will like block it, which is arguably kind of the same thing as being in jail, man. Like if you cannot use money, then right. So that's the situation there, and I guess, of course, like it comes from ignorance. Like they thought crypto is all a scam. There were a lot of scams popping up. During the bull market, it's very easy to scam people and get the hype. So a couple of projects showed up in Bolivia that were actually scams. Aside from like really good projects, but like ironically, the good projects take a long time to flourish, while the scams like manage to pop up fast. And based on a few anecdotal cases, they just decided to forbid the entire thing. And in terms of utility, luckily, well, I don't know if luckily, because inflation in Bolivia is not that high compared to, I don't know, Argentina or Venezuela. But that's because the government is basically subsidizing the exchange rate with the dollar. So our reserve, like the country reserves, are going down. So they're basically just postponing inflation. We might see, I guess, some hyperinflation, or like some event that like really shakes things in the Bolivian economy. And I think that's when people are going to start looking for more in depth on the promise of crypto. Because for the meantime, it's been mostly used, for trading, for gaming. Although lately I've been hearing inside the community a lot of refi projects coming up with support to animal shelters, and also recycling, like circular economy. So I feel that people are starting to wake up a little bit more on the technology side and starting to see the real use cases in Bolivia.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'm really curious to sort of follow along the Bolivian journey and ecosystem and see where things end up. And I think on that point, like, what do you see in some future case, or in the not so far off distant future, being potential use cases for crypto in Bolivia?
So I think like supply chain is going to be very interesting because well, it's been in talks for a long time, like all the supply chain idea using blockchain. But I think that will be. I've heard of many people like trying to innovate in that area. So I think that might be one of the first use cases. I think another one is kind of lending for micro farmers and like micro entrepreneurs, because well, the rates that are offered in Bolivia are really not great. I've read some of your research, and I think that's something, unfortunately, that we share with Guatemala. So I don't know. I feel that once the economy starts suffering, starts shaking, people are gonna look for alternatives, and the dollar has been typically the shelter, but the dollar is suffering a lot as well, like big inflation. So people are gonna find alternatives. We've we always look around, like we're in the center of Latin America, so we're always looking around what other countries are doing. And Argentina is getting a massive crypto adoption, so I think we're gonna follow along their lines.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I don't know. I've never been to Bolivia, so I've it's hard for one to like fully position themselves in what the situation is like. But I think, as you said, right, is we share a lot of similarities as far as like the role the traditional financial like institutions play, the way they're structured, the lack of access that they provide people in, so especially disenfranchised communities, right? I know one of the things I do know about Bolivia is you have one of the highest percentage of indigenous peoples, for example, as well. Guatemala and Ecuador are up there too. But I am really excited to see like the ecosystem mature and grow and develop. And I just think it's like really exciting that in a country where if a bank sees you transacting with crypto, basically they'll block your account, that you guys are still launching this Ethereum Bolivia community. So on the Ethereum Bolivia community, I'd love to hear like how was that developed? Like what have you seen emerge out of that? What are you really looking forward to continuing to happen?
Yeah, it's been great. Like it felt like quite organic how it came about. Of course, like DEFCON in being in Bogota was an excellent push. Like really motivated all of us, all of the Ethereum communities in LATAM to do something. And then yeah, we just started bringing people like saying, look, this is an interesting technology to build on. We really made a lot of emphasis on building and like developing, and of course, like not only like programming, but developing businesses around it, developing ideas that use the technology to welcome more people and filter out the traders, because I feel that there's way more than enough of like trading groups, trading communities. So we wanted to focus a lot on the building side and make a big emphasis on that. And people really embraced that ethos. Also, of course, trying to bring about the Ethereum Foundation values. For example, subtraction. I'm a big believer in that. So I've always, since the beginning, we've been encouraging the community to get involved, and it's been great. Like more and more people are becoming extremely active members. Some of them are starting to develop tools that we can use as a community to manage tasks and stuff like that, using some incentive mechanisms like POAPs and stuff like that, and well, getting some making it fun to engage with the community. So it's not Bolivia is quite small, and I feel that the community is not the biggest one in Latin America, but I feel very close to them, even though I'm not all the time in Bolivia. I feel super close to them. We organize like monthly meetups, one online and one in person in 2 different cities for now. And I feel that the connection is very real. We're all developing very interesting relationships with each other within the community, and a lot of projects are flourishing from there. So I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, it's amazing like how this little seed of like a community can just serve as like a huge catalyzer for progress and bringing people together. Like with the Ethereum Guatemala community, it's something we witness as well. Is you just plant this one little seed, and whether that is an event, where we have our sort of first Ethereum gathering in Guatemala coming up, And just that has served as this like incredible sort of like shelling point, right? Around like, hey, let's stop, because it's true that in Latin America, oftentimes like the crypto communities are focused on like short-term trading versus like long-term sort of games, and really focusing on building. And so it's cool to see that happening as well.
Yeah, and I feel that what you say is super important because um, it's gonna be a big challenge to bring this mindset, like this long-term mindset, to Latin America in general, because in most countries, most people really live by the day. So that's a very short-term way of living, but like they really don't have an alternative. And like this technology will bring them alternatives, but like changing the mindset, I think it's gonna be a big challenge for Latin America. But super excited to be part of like the Eth Kipu community and like tackle it together, with galaxy
Sure.
brains like you and all the other people who are there.
So for those that don't know what Eth Kipu is, can you give us like a quick rundown?
Yeah, of course. So Eth Kipu started with events, Eth Latam events in different cities around Latin America. The first one in Argentina and the second one in Bogota. And then not too long ago, we decided as a community to create a foundation that has not only the events vertical, which was the Eth Latam, but also some other interesting developments like a think tank, uh, encouraging validator nodes across Latin America, learning and education, community, helping communities set up, as well as there are so many cool stuff going on. I always forget one or two, but we also have. Am I forgetting one?
We have the public goods
The
section
public
as well.
goods. Oh yeah, that's that one. Super cool
Yeah.
as well. That it's basically like to encourage the development of public goods, which is something we all do naturally in Ethereum.
Yeah.
So it's like great to see it coming from Eth Kipu as well.
Right. And I think just like super important in Latin America as well. Like I think we've, as a whole, have been influenced by these very liberalized economies that don't focus at all on public goods. Like it's been very focused on like privatizing everything, making sure everything is like, the government has as little reach as possible, right? And supports. You can't generalize. Like each country has its own sort of political structures, but generally the trend, sort of during and post Cold War, has been one that doesn't necessarily look to support public goods, right? And in fact, it's been the opposite. It's like let the free market decide like what is valuable and what is not, and oftentimes people end up getting left out of the equation as a consequence of that. So that's a whole other topic for a conversation. But I want to explore. We talked about DeFi and how it could serve as like a really powerful sort of starting point, and I'm really bullish on the role of decentralized social as well for onboarding the masses alongside like gaming and culture. We've seen massive amounts of onboarding happen through Reddit NFTs, Instagram NFTs. Starbucks has its own like loyalty program that leverages NFTs, right? So we're seeing a lot of demand for block space being taken up through one sort of more fun engagements of crypto versus like swapping assets to and from, and two, doing it in such a way where people don't even necessarily know that they're engaging with these different like protocols, right? So I'd love to get your thesis on like how do we get to a place where last mile communities can access DeFi and it is substantially better services than what their traditional financial institutions are offering them. And I guess like looking at it from a super high level, like what role these other protocols can offer to the ecosystem. Whether that's decentralized social, I know that's a space that you work in a lot, but you're also at the intersection of DeFi, which is why I thought this would be a great conversation. But yeah, I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities. Like finance is super expensive. Like traditional finance is super expensive, especially for like people in rural areas, for example, that don't have access to a bank nearby or something like that. Like there are so many costs involved, and that's probably one of the main reasons why such a big portion of the population in Latin America in general, I would dare to say, is unbanked, right? And that's of course keeps people in like around places where it's yeah, well, if they don't have access to financing, they cannot grow as much as they could. And in Bolivia, for example, it's people are natural entrepreneurs there, but because of this, there's a big barrier for them to grow more. So I think there's a big opportunity there. That's what I mentioned. Lending for micro entrepreneurs and farmers is a big one. I also believe that payments and especially remittances is very big because, well, Latin America is are very, very big users of remittances, and I haven't seen any remittances product yet that makes it easier, as you say, like almost making it seamless, as if you're not maybe using crypto, but it's like way more efficient, way cheaper. Um, I say that because I personally, that's my most real life use case that I use it for, like to uh, send and receive money from my family in Bolivia. So I think that's a big one.
And I think that's like that for me from a product market fit perspective. Like payments is the most obvious like use case, and remittances specifically, like cross-border remittances. And I'm sure like the audience has heard a number of times now how expensive it is. But at least in Guatemala, anytime I want to do an international transfer, it costs me $40. And if I'm sending $100 back home, it makes zero sense. So really, I think it's thinking about like, okay, how can we just find this really inefficient system? And like, well, why don't you use PayPal? You can open a PayPal account if you're from Guatemala, for example.
Bolivia also now.
Exactly, right? And so all of these solutions that are in theory developed to solve these problems just don't really fit the bill. And like crypto just fits right in there. Yeah, and switching gears, I guess, a little bit to social. So why are you building on social? What makes you bullish about decentralized social? And yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, well, I think if we're talking about onboarding the next billion of users, I think social has immense opportunity for that. And maybe also talking about people in developing economies, there's a big opportunity for them to make money and like to basically level the playing field for them and any other influencers or creators that emerge in Web 2. I think we will see a big wave of micro influencers that like will be able to make a living out of it, especially in developing economies. Yeah, well, Web3 social is basically bringing the power back to the people and giving them opportunities to monetize their content. Um, yeah, well, getting power over their data that's like we've been stripped out of it for like way too long. So I really believe that that's going to unlock a lot of dynamics that are going to be super interesting. That's why I believe that Troop is going to be, because, well, in Latin America, people are very collaborative by nature. Like we love making small tribes with a group of friends, like always. We're a little bit more collectivistic than in the West, let's say. So that's also a little bit the thesis of Troop, that like we love to learn from our peers and like collaborate with our peers. And we've seen that with finance, like creation of like group chats to onboard your friends, and I believe that that's going to be a major driver for adoption in Web3 in not only Latin America, also like in Southeast Asia and so on. Social is crucial, right? Like DeFi can be a thing on its own, but like if you bring a social aspect to it, it just unlocks so many more possibilities.
For sure. I mean, we check Twitter, Instagram, TikTok multiple times a day. How many times are you going into your bank account and like checking that? Like at most maybe once. And I think that's really the thing that we haven't necessarily optimized for, but I think is continuing to sort of change in the overall discourse. Is let's focus on user experience. Let's focus on, the way I see it is we have like supply side, which a lot of Denver here is focused on that. That's infrastructure, that's making things faster, safer, more decentralized. And on the other side, you have your demand side, right? And that's like user experience, making sure that people can engage with things in ways that are fun, that add a lot of value as well. And that naturally will just create a lot more demand to happen. And I think like social is what I feel super bullish on as well, right? Because I see it all the time in Guatemala where you have someone on Twitter, for example, just like scrolling on their phone, like constantly, or Instagram or TikTok. Like people in Guatemala love TikTok, for example, right? Or like YouTube, spend lots of times there. And there's so much to be learned, but at the same time, these relationships that we have with these social protocols is fundamentally really broken and really extractive. So, and where do you like? What? Let's talk about the sort of intersection of social and finance as well. Like, what do you see? And again, always keeping in mind, like, how could we bring more access through social to unlock ultimately like utility to DeFi?
Yeah, I love that question because we've thought quite deeply about it, and traditional finance is very top top down, right? Like there's a bunch of guys in suits that decide what a good investment is, what a I don't know good savings rate is, whatever. So we want to turn that completely upside down, and especially in an ecosystem like crypto, where it's very hard to catch up. I mean, I'm struggling myself. We're in East Denver. I think I heard like more than 150 booths here of projects. So imagine, like, it's impossible to catch up with it. And we've been traditionally leaving all the catching up with like what's the new trend, what's the most innovative thing, in hands of these people who are up there, who probably are quite out of touch with the reality of maybe the 99% of the world. So turning it completely upside down, and I think so. So we're talking about DeFi, but like, in order to turn it completely upside down, you need to enable the social aspect to it, because you need like the collective power to sort of crowdsource all these ideas and all this knowledge, and you know, if you manage to get a group of people to think in one direction, or like to think critically as well, and like try to correct each other and find what the problems are and like what solutions there are, they're much more in touch with reality, so they will understand, okay, that's actually something that's going to bring a lot of value, so we should actually put our invest in it, or put our resources into it, instead of having someone telling us from up there what our investment portfolio should have. So that's a little bit the thesis of Troop. And I love during DEFCON, I think I've met someone who's another fellow like you, Gabriela. She's developing these saving circles, and that was a big inspiration for Troop as well. Because if people don't know, there's in Latin America, and I've heard in other continents as well, like Southeast Asia and Africa, there's this concept of saving circles where people can, basically they have one person receive money from, let's say, a group of 10 people. One person receives it 1 month, then the next month they give the money to the next person. So it's a way of saving in community. And blockchain is kind of like the perfect technology to enable that, because you can make it trustless, and you can make it much more seamless to do that. And that's, again, another example of how important the community and the social aspect is in finance. I mean, if we look back in the past, we've always managed our resources collectively, right? Like it's a very, like, if we look in the prehistory, you would almost never see some like individual who was like just managing the resources for their own, which is what we see with finance in the West in general right now. And so we kind of want to tap into that, kind of bringing back the financial aspect to communities and to more collective lens, basically.
Awesome. Yeah. Finance and money and social, I think, is ultimately an expression of the same thing, which is our common beliefs. So we believe in a certain currency being valuable. We believe in certain institutions backing up certain currencies that ultimately make them valuable, right? And specifically with social, we can really start to shift and change these collective consciousness, right? And shift the way sometimes people feel about things, or the way we organize about in different ways. Some of the biggest revolutions in recent history have been organized on social media. on Twitter, on Facebook groups, which is amazing, right? And so how do we create these sort of robust, anti-fragile, censorship-resistant social media communication channels is going to be crucial for sure. And, and beneath that is this expression of like human trust. And we can build robust financial systems that are much more equitable, that don't have these unnecessary intermediaries by building out these so-called or leveraging so-called trustless systems, but ultimately they just like bring so much trust, and I think that's what's really exciting.
Yeah, I love that as well. It's trustless technology. It's as you say, it's very paradoxical. Like it's called trustless, but it actually makes things.
It's all about building trust.
Building
right?
trust. Yeah, it's super bullish on that, and I think we are like very aligned on how important it is to bring the social aspect to social and the reputation and all these things. Just to make because even within trustless, like you can still there's people who still manage to like find a way around it and benefit at the expense of others, and I think things around reputation and social are gonna level the playing field again and take those bad actors out, basically.
For sure. Yeah, there's one example. This is not crypto specific, but I spoke with a project once. They were based in El Salvador, and the way they thought about financial inclusion was they actually you gave them all sorts of horrible permissions. Apparently, the data was encrypted, but they functionally got access to your entire phone usage. This was on Android, and as a consequence of that, they were then able to analyze all of the data and deduce the extent to which you were like a reputable person. Again, lots of data privacy concerns there, but the process of like, we basically just want to understand like what your digital activity says about you, and based off of that, make like what they called nano loans. So it was something like $50 loans. And then if you paid that, then they would sort of aggregate your loan repayment over a period of time. And they would look at things like, are you messaging consistently on WhatsApp at 3 a.m? They wouldn't see the underlying messages. They could just see like your activity on your phone. And I thought that was like a really interesting use case. But again, like huge privacy concerns, which fundamentally like decentralized social addresses.
Yeah, I think, so you're saying this wasn't on crypto yet, right?
This was not crypto, like private, no, there was like zero privacy concerns here. But again, it is really interesting to think about, like, can we paint better pictures about people and also do so in such a way that's not dystopic as well? 'Cause sometimes I get really concerned about that side of the equation as well. Are we building massive surveillance systems through these public blockchains, right? And I think like the privacy question is crucial.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing zero knowledge events and talks all over, probably even before DEFCON, but I think DEFCON was like big topic, and we're seeing it still here, and I think that's exactly what's gonna solve that issue, and I'm super bullish on that as well. I love, well, the galaxy brains that are working that like don't, I'm impressed by them every day.
For sure. No, I think zero knowledge will definitely play a key role, and how do we establish reputation systems or ways of analyzing all this data without necessarily invading people's privacy. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd love to explore, like, are there any other avenues or key roadblocks you see as far as how we can bring mass adoption of both DeFi and decentralized social, but what do you see as being just like crucial next steps to onboarding the next billion, particularly thinking about the Latin American context and what you've seen, witnessed, and learned from these wider Latin American communities that are popping up?
Yeah, that's a very challenging question. I think, most of the challenge I think come from education, education and like making the technology accessible to everyone. Your countryman, for example, France, I was really impressed by him. Like I met him in Germany a few months ago, and he told me that he was developing a wallet that didn't even have it was for people who couldn't read, so it was only symbols, and it was aimed to he was developing like DAOs for communities in rural areas or like even very remote communities, and they most of them don't speak any language that's like universal. Let's say so. Well, the universal language is symbols. So he developed a wallet that had more like you could operate it with only symbols, which is like groundbreaking. I think like if you manage to communicate to that level, then that's a very good entry point to start like exploring ways to make it much more accessible to people. I think it also just takes time. We've been very used to like the classic Web 2 sort of dynamics, login, password, and so on, which in the end they're like just as weird as Web 3, but like we're just more used to them. So I think we just need some time to transition there. I think we still need to find a use case that really tackles like taps on every like or like a very big portion of the population in Latin America or like in developing countries that really like solves a very very hard issue for them, and then salud. And based on that, I think that it can I think it can happen like from one day to the other, that like okay, there's an actual use case, and then like it just starts triggering adoption all over, and people start finding more and more use case around that. And like some of the ones that we talked about, like micro lending, remittances, payments, I think are going to be some of them. I'm really bullish on like builders in Latin America. I will never forget I always mention this, but like in Mexico, they increased the pool of prices because all the hacks were like very innovative and like really solving a lot of issues for real people. So that was like, okay, I'm really bullish on like Latin American builders.
Latin America is where it's at, man. I'm so bullish on LATAM. We have this booth here at Eth Denver, and it's genuinely my favorite place to be. It's just attracted so many incredible minds and people who are driven by real utility, real adoption, and thinking about things like fundamentally from like base principles, which is your entryway into crypto is your wallet. So let's make better wallets. You know, it's like such an obvious thing. Awesome, man. Well, this has been really cool, really interesting hearing more about your experience with Ethereum Bolivia and your thesis on social and just like broader challenges and roadblocks. So just to wrap things up, where can people find you and learn more about what you're up to and your work?
Yeah, thanks. This has been amazing, Marcus. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, you can find me on socials as Nicknode, almost everywhere. NICNODE. Lens Protocol, Twitter, Telegram. Just hit me up there.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Marcus.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and joining us along this journey of discovery and exploration as we look towards the frontier of decentralized finance in Latin America. This episode was made possible thanks to the support of the Ethereum Foundation's Fellowship Program, Lens Protocol, and the Celo Foundation. The ETH Fellowship Program is a forum for leaders who are driven by leveraging Ethereum as a public good to help billions of people coordinate and thrive. The Fellowship Program aims to support individuals who are passionate about identifying barriers to mass adoption and breaking down the barriers for underrepresented communities to access crypto. Lens Protocol is an open source tech stack for building decentralized social networking services. The protocol was developed by the Aave companies and launched on Polygon in May of 2022. Through Lens, Web3 developers can build decentralized social media applications and marketplaces that leverage NFT technology to form a fully composable, user-owned social graph, where the connections and interactions between people are owned by individuals, users, and creators, rather than established networks. And if you're looking for a blockchain platform that's designed to work in the real world, Celo might be the solution for you. With its focus on being carbon negative, mobile first, and EVM compatible, Celo is leading the way towards a new digital economy that's accessible to everyone, particularly those in the global south. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family. Let's connect on Twitter at MarcusDotam, as well as on Lens, Marcus.lens. Until next time, keep learning, exploring, growing, and I'll see you on the next episode. Ciao.